it was announced on your website, of course, so I only just tweeted it.
Oh, no. Well, but we have it, and we put it in our newsletter and things of that sort, so I think we'll be okay. Give it another minute, and we'll just we'll start. So you're presenting from home today? It's a nice photo you have back there.
I know, I was looking here before, and I'm like, how professional is this? But
now it looks good.
But yeah, no, I often work from home on Wednesdays or Fridays.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, because it's harder to get work done when I'm at McGill.
Oh yeah. Let's see if I have any.
I think I see someone coming by your office. Oh, no.
Oh, behind me.
I can see the shadow go by the window in your door.
Oh, that's funny. And we're just waiting for people to join, but we're about to start, I think, in a minute or so.
I can't get the connection on the website to work.
The login?
Yeah, it says contact your host for the password.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's why then.
That's why.
Oh, no. Sorry, Paula, we're having some technical difficulties.
No worries, no worries.
I'm just going to see if...
I can't get the start meeting button.
It's not?
I'll have to try again.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
Is it because I'm already the presenter and you're the host?
No, it's working. Oh, Pat was saying that the connection isn't, she can't seem to get it to work, but I'm able to use the link, so I don't know. Okay. Okay. Maybe there's an issue with the link, but we'll record it. I'm just going to try it one more time, and if not, we'll just start it, because I'm not seeing any issues. Is it not working?
No.
Is there a reason?
I suggest you get underway.
Okay.
Record it, and then we start recording.
Okay. So, I don't know what's going on, but there seems to be some sort of issue with the link on the website, and I don't know how to fix it. The good thing we do record these, and they are available. So maybe we'll just start.
Okay.
And I know Pat may be trying to figure it out why it's not working, but we'll just start it. Okay. So welcome to today's BC Support Unit webinar, which will be about an hour in length. My name is Belinda Jampo, and our webinar today is entitled How Health Organization Stakeholders and Academics Can Work Together to Improve Organization Practices, Recommendations for Practice. Now, this webinar will be presented by Dr. Paula Bush, and she's on here. So I would like to begin this webinar by acknowledging the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations from whose traditional lands we are leading today's webinar on. Now, you may have noticed that I have muted you all as you've joined, and that's just to avoid any background noise as we go underway with this presentation. Now, we encourage you to use the chat box at the end of the presentation to share any questions that you might have. The chat box can be found at the bottom right area of your screen. So at the end of the presentation, your microphone will be unmuted and you can ask your question using the microphone or via the chat, whichever you prefer. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website, bcsupportunit.ca, under resources, so you can share it with your friends and colleagues. Now over to you, Dr. Paula Bush.
Thank you, Belinda. So hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be able to share this talk with people in British Columbia. I am actually in Quebec, in Montreal, and I'm with the Quebec-SPOR Support Unit here in Quebec. And specifically, I'm with the platform of our unit, which is about methodological developments. So the presentation today is something that we developed through this platform of the Quebec-SPOR Support Unit. So just before I jump into the presentation, I will mention a few lines about our platform, because we're not here only to serve Quebecers, but we can serve people outside of the province as well. So we develop new methods, we adapt existing methods, we create tools, things that are in the realm of web applications to adaptation of questionnaires or patient-reported outcome measures, for example. We do a lot of what is referred to as transcultural adaptation, so translation of tools from French to English, English to French, possibly other languages going forward as well. But it's a little bit more than just translation. We follow the international standards of transcultural adaptation, with the idea being that the language that a tool is translated into is culturally adapted. So that's just a few words about what we do. You can go to our website to see more. The website is in French, but the content is in both languages. So if there's a tool that's on the website, it will be in both languages, but the interface itself of the website is only in French. So moving forward then with today's presentation. So we're going to talk about organizational participatory research. To begin with, I will define how I refer to as participatory research, and then specifically what I mean by organizational participatory research. Then moving on to the benefits, or the extra benefits, I should say, of OPR, and how to actually conduct OPR so that we achieve some of these extra benefits. And I'll define what I mean by that in a moment. So first of all, how do we participate in research? So I'm talking about so-called academic researchers who get involved in a research project. Now they can, this table here is not meant to be exhaustive. It's just an example to show that the columns are various stages of a research project. So a person who's not an academic researcher can join up with a researcher from a university, for example, and participate in one or many of the various stages of a research project. And the rows in this table are types of participation, going from a very low to no kind of power. If you're just co-opted and you're there as like a token, you don't have a lot of power, but you can go all the way down to being totally in charge of the decisions that are made for the research project. So any person can participate in a study in all of these different places and to varying degrees. And in any one given research project, a person may participate like on a consultation in one area, but collective action at another stage in the research. And there may be a whole bunch of people in the group working on the research project, but all participating to different degrees and in different places. So that's generally overall what we mean by participating in research. When I talk about participatory research, there's all kinds of language out there. Participatory action research, community-based participatory research, action research, collective action research, all types. I could go on and on. And the various definitions vary depending on who you speak with. So I always begin by saying what I mean. So I follow the tradition of Lawrence Green and collaborators who put forth this definition you see on the left-hand side of the slide in 1995. And The figure to the right is just a sort of a way of summarizing this definition. So participatory research is systematic inquiry. It's research like any other kind of research. It's not just qualitative research. It can be quantitative. I have seen participatory randomized controlled trials, for instance. And it's not just a set of methods. For instance, photo voice is often a method that is referred to as a participatory method. But when I talk about participatory research, I'm talking above that, I should say. So it's research like any other research, but we work with the people who, when I say we, I mean the researchers, work with the people who are either affected by the issue that's being studied or who are going to be called upon to act on the results of the study. And the overall objective is, well, we're trying to do research. We want to take action. It's not just research for curiosity's sake. And education. And I'll make a little pause here and say, in 1995, the word used was education. Today, I would refer to it more as learning, because education is perhaps a little patronizing. And it's not to say that the researchers are educating the people that are working with them. It's the learning is everybody learns from everybody else to varying different points. And that's one of the great things about working in a participatory way, is that the complementarity of everybody's expertise around the table helps everybody to move forward on the issue. So that's participatory research at large. If I go into it more specifically, if you think back to the initial table I showed you, for me, participatory research is about sharing the decision-making with respect to the research, not with respect to the intervention that may or may not be part of the research. So what I mean by that is everybody around the table works together to determine what is the focus of the research going to be, what data will be collected, how we're going to analyze it, what do the results mean, and what do we do with the results. I'll get back to data analysis in a moment, because oftentimes when I say that you can do the data analysis can be done with the stakeholders, people look at me like, nah, I don't believe you. But I will get back to what I mean by that when we go into more details. So these are the 4 minimum places that the so-called non-academic stakeholders in the project should be sharing the decision-making with the researchers in order for this study to be referred to as participatory research. So that's my definition. Well, I'm not the only one to have that definition, but this is the definition that I'm using when I speak with you today about participatory research. So organizational participatory research. How is this? This is sort of a branch or a subset of what we would find within participatory research. So the objective is we want to improve knowledge and practice. Okay, it's about organizational learning. We want to engage the organization members as reflective participants.
Sure, Paula, are you sharing your screen right now, or?
Am I not? Oh no, am I not?
That's what I just realized. Sorry.
Oh no.
Okay. It's okay.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh, and there's somebody who's joined us online. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You're muted now, Belinda. I believe I can see you speaking, but I can't hear you.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we're good now. We can see it. Perfect.
Okay. Shall I go back? Okay, so to put this up again, so these are the areas where shared decision making should should take place in participatory research. And then the objectives then when we're talking about organizational participatory researchers, we want to improve practice within the organization. So let's say we're talking about a health clinic or a ward in a hospital. We want to improve practices within that organization. We want to engage people as reflexive practitioners, so they're thinking about their own practice, and we are involving people in all the aspects of the research. That is to say, in these 4 stages of the research listed here, and even potentially additional stages. So some of you may be aware of what we refer to as community-based participatory research. So just to really briefly give you a distinction between what I mean by OPR versus CBPR, community-based participatory research, the way to determine what it is we're talking about is the object of change. So in a community-based participatory research project, everybody is working together to help the community change something. So perhaps to get community members to improve healthy lifestyle behaviors. So there may well be organizations and community members involved in that project with the researchers, but they're trying to change something within the community. Whereas in organizational participatory research, the object of change is in the organization. So we want to improve organizational practices. We want perhaps to improve the individual workers' practices, nurses, and so on. And again, there may well be patients involved in the study with the organization members and the researchers, but the objective is to change something within the organization as opposed to getting the patients to self-manage or to self-care more effectively, for instance. So that's the main distinction to keep in mind when we're talking about organizational participatory research versus other types. The object of change is within the organization. So why do we bother? Some of you may know when you do this kind of research, it can take quite a bit more time than it would if you were doing a traditional study. So why bother? Those of us who do this, of course, are biased towards it, but we wanted to, a couple of years ago, people I work with here in Montreal wanted to dig into participatory research, more organizational participatory research, and figure out, okay, is it worth it? Does it end up with better results? Do we get something more out of it by working this way? So we did a large systematic review, and in the end we had over 100 studies included in the systematic review, and the balance of what I'm going to present now is essentially the result of this review. So what we found is that beyond achieving what the stakeholders in any given project wanted to achieve, beyond answering the research objective, other things happened. So these other things that were beyond the objective of the study is what we've termed extra benefits. So we found that in 41 studies out of the 107, we found instances of workforce development. So an example of this would be that, this is a quote, a direct copy-paste of a section of one article in our study. So an example of workforce development would be that people in the study, they learn more about their actual work and their role within the institution. And they also begin to understand more about the other people in the organization. So you have, for example, around the table, doctors and nurses and social workers and the researchers, for instance, working around one project, and you've got these people who don't normally interact with each other this way. And then through the project, they get to know one another better and understand each other better and understand the work of the other one better, and then that can translate into improved work relationships outside of the study. Another type of extra benefit we found was organizational development. So the first one was more individual, and this is more about organizational development, because certain things that change within the study, like the relationships or whatever activities that the research group may put into place, given the way that the work is done, they are sustainable, they stay. So then the organization as a whole benefits. A third type is the realm of partnerships. So there's no participatory research without a partnership. You have the people from the institution, the organization, who partner with the university members. So they learn through the whole project, they learn how to partner better, but they also then learn how to develop partnerships outside of the research project, which then may help them to improve things within their institution. We also found that leadership is developed quite significantly among a lot of the people who are involved in these types of projects, because they're involved in working towards some kind of a practice change, and through the process then they may develop the skills and the confidence, for instance, to move things forward with respect to that change. And the last type of extra benefit we only found it in 6 studies, but I always bring it up because it's not because we didn't find it in the studies that it wasn't present. It just means that the authors didn't write about it in the article. So that's one thing. Now, from my own experience as the so-called academic researcher involved in these types of projects, I always learn something. And I always, come out of the project far more well-versed in whatever, and being more able to go and do my job as a researcher much better at following the project. So I know that I always, my own capacity gets built through this project, through the process. We don't always write about that in our papers, though. So, and I would encourage the people to write about that in their papers going forward, because otherwise I find that we remain kind of patronizing, or as a paternalistic stance, if we only talk about what if the researcher only talks about what the stakeholders he works with got out of the project, as opposed to acknowledging what he or she got out of the project themselves. So those are the types of extra benefits that we found. Now, who's to say that you'll end up with some of these extra benefits, and how do you ensure that your project will lead to these extra benefits? This is what I'm going to dig into now in the next for the next few minutes. So just to before I go into the details of it, what we did in our study is we had 107 studies that were in our literature review, and we grouped them into 2 pools. One where there was really a high level of co-decision making between the researchers and the organizational stakeholders right the way through the study. And in the other pool, we had studies where the researchers involved the organizational stakeholders right the way through, but more at a level of consultation. So our hypothesis was that co-decision making would lead to a higher chance of a study leading to at least one extra benefit compared to consultation. We also hypothesized that the longer the project lasted, the greater the chances would be, because it takes a long time for people to develop their relationships and develop their partnership. And we thought, okay, if a study is more than a year old, then maybe there's a greater chance of exhibiting an extra benefit. We hypothesized, what you see in red there, is that if the organization was the one who went to the researcher to say, hey, let's get some help with this project, that it would lead to extra benefits, and so on. We thought again that if the managers were part of the team, and whatnot, there would be extra benefits. But all we found is what you see in red here, that in fact, when the impetus of the study comes from the organization themselves, then the chances of observing at least one extra benefit are quadrupled. So that's pretty huge. We did not find a difference between co-decision making versus consultation type of participation, which is great on the one hand from the perspective of say, managers who might not want to be able to say to their workers, okay, you know, I'll give you a half a day a week to work on this study. But on the other hand, I want to say don't take this for cash, because what can I say, this study, like any literature review, one of the limitations is we're limited by what is in the papers. And what we found that you don't necessarily see in this table here, but in the nitty-gritty of the results, is we did find that there's something worth looking at between these two types of participation. It's worth doing, you know, subsequent studies to see if we can't begin to tease apart the level of participation that is associated with extra benefits. So, how do you work together to achieve these extra benefits? I'm going to spend some time on this slide here. And this figure is, or I should say the practice guide that is on the BC Support Unit website is an operational, or is meant to operationalize this figure. So that practice guide, again, it's all developed from this literature review. And then we ended up with 4 groups of recommendations, a total of 26 recommendations that we built from the literature review. And then we worked with patients, about 8 patients, because that was sort of a piece that was missing in the literature review, as there weren't that many studies where patients had been involved. So we worked with 8 patients to bring the patient voice into the recommendation. And we also worked with some clinicians and some managers to further elaborate those recommendations. And then we put that through a Delphi with, I believe, 18 different OPR experts from around the world. And that's how we ended up with the practice guide that you've got on the site. So rather than going through each of those recommendations that are in the practice guide, I'm going to focus on this figure. And this figure is a result of a qualitative analysis of 83 of the studies that were in the literature review that had really a high degree of co-decision making type participation from the beginning right through to the end of each research project. A bit of a legend to look at this figure. What is in red is a process. What is in blue is an outcome. And as the colors sort of drift through in the middle, as they sort of drift from red to blue, these are sort of intermediary process outcomes, because it's really, the whole process of OPR is very iterative and ongoing, and it's presented in a bit of a linear way here, when in fact there isn't really anything linear about participatory research. So the arrow that goes right across the top, and it is meant to say, okay, the work group processes that are illustrated there happen from beginning right the way through the project, okay? And on the left, you start with forming the work group. So if you're familiar with CBPR, usually there's a community advisory board that is put into place. So it's a group of people from the community with the researchers who govern the research project. In the case of organizational participatory research, the term that I saw most often used is a work group or a working group. And it's the same idea. It's a bunch of people from the organization, could be any type of practitioner, administrator, manager, patients, caregivers, anybody who has a stake in the issue being looked at in the study, and the academic researchers. So they form a work group and they run the project from beginning to end. Throughout, in these work groups, we found that it's important that those groups be structured. Each meeting should be really structured and should be focused, because people are busy. Nobody wants to go to a meeting and just chit-chat and feel like they're getting nowhere. So each meeting should have a specific objective, and that objective should be followed and worked through, and each subsequent meeting should pick up from where the last one left off, so that the group feels that they are moving forward consistently. The frequency of the meetings, I can't give you any recommendations about that based on what I've seen in the literature, because it really quite varies a lot from once a week to once every 2 months, for instance. What I did notice is that the frequency is usually quite regular, as opposed to having a meeting up here and there where you feel like it. If there's a regular meeting schedule in place, then that helps to create momentum and helps to create or to maintain engagement in the process. It's also super important that those meetings be really supportive. And by that I mean that everybody feels that they can express themselves, that they can say what's on their mind, because the honesty and the transparency, or I should say honesty, is crucial to developing good synergy within the working group, and everybody, shouldn't say getting along, but everybody feeling like they're all working towards the same thing. And a lot of what we've seen in all kinds of other types of participatory research is what we would refer to as fruitful conflict, as I should say. It can be very beneficial to work through conflict, because when you come out the other side, then the working group tends to be quite well gelled, and the trust in each other grows. So another thing that's important is that to always produce and circulate minutes. That doesn't have to be formal meeting minutes. It could just be some notes. The idea being that everybody can follow if they weren't present. I did see in some studies there where there was a lot of turnover within the working group, and some people in the studies, they flat out say it didn't cause an issue. It didn't negatively affect the work group. And the same thing with people missing meetings. Provided that the information is there and accessible, then people can keep up even if they're not present. So those processes, the three there that I've just named on the left in red, they will lead to an increase in expression of viewpoints, acceptance of compromise, which can be huge in an institution or an organization when you're trying to create change, confidence to accept change, or confidence to effect change, I should say, and engagement. So those are the processes that are maintained right the way through. If we move below to the box in red, starting with the heading of work group meetings, these are processes that take place more at the start of a project. So, or I should say before the actual big changes start to take place. So work group meetings they provide time and space for discussion, debate, sharing, systematic reflection, and review and progress. Okay, so it's a space that normally the organization members don't have to get together to be able to share and discuss and debate about these things. So just putting in place the work group meetings can be hugely beneficial to the organization. Two main things that take place during these meetings are data analysis and discussing the findings. So data analysis. this doesn't mean participating in data analysis does not mean, it can mean, but it does not have to mean that people are doing the actual technical work of statistical analyses in SAS or R, SPSS, what have you. It does not have to mean that they are participating in doing the actual coding of the qualitative data. What it does mean is that they are participating in the decisions as to what analysis will be performed for what reasons. So, for instance, I did a project with a YMCA several years ago, and we were evaluating their one of their programs that teenagers participated in. And I would talk to them. I was like, well, do you want to know, if you want to look at the participation of the boys versus the girls, or of the younger kids versus the older kids, or the levels of participation in the spring versus in the winter, for example. And they would tell me what they wanted to look at because they knew, okay, based on their framework, my ideas of what to look at weren't necessarily adapted to their needs because I was not in the organization and I didn't understand. So that's a way of participating in data analysis. And if that's still not clear, please feel free to ask me questions at the end. And the other main thing then that people do in work group meetings is they discuss the findings. So one of the things that's great about participatory research is that you look at preliminary findings. Because everybody's involved right the way through, you don't have to wait to get the final results of the study. You can discuss the preliminary findings and learn from there and move and change things in the project as you go forward. So I should back up a second here. So the data analysis, if you look at what's in the brackets next to analyze data, those are things that happen as a result of doing data analysis together, and the same thing beneath with respect to discussing the findings. So these types of processes of working on the data analysis and discussing the findings, you'll find that the people in the work group, it gels, it's much more coherent. Their dialogue increases, the work group will reflect as they're looking at and doing looking at some preliminary results of analyses that leads to people reflecting a lot more on what's going on, and as a result, they may end up modifying the project. The other thing that's really great about the findings, discussing the findings together, is that the perceptions of the people in the organization are validated. So by that I mean, oftentimes, you're working and you think that what you're doing is good. You think that your something about your work process with your patients is helping them to feel better in some respect, but you have no actual empirical evidence to show you that you're right. You just have your perception. But if we study it through a project, and then we can show, no, your perception is accurate, then that feels really good. So it leads to the people in the organization feeling that much better about the work that they do, and then continuing to do that work because they have some confidence or some greater improved confidence in the knowledge that the work that they're doing, that the way that they do it is very positive. The findings, discussing the findings helps people to increase their awareness about the issue being studied. They become more motivated to effect changes. People within the working group, then they'll start to become much more collaborative with respect to how they're going to start solving the issues that they see. And as with any study, oftentimes, a lot of research leads to more questions. Well, it's the same thing that'll happen within the working group, is they'll get the results of what they've done, and then they'll realize, we should do this, that, and the next thing. So then there's becomes a cyclical process that engages because one project may lead to another project. So the two pieces of the figure here on the left, now we're moving much more into the more distal outcomes of participatory research with organizations. And what the figure means to illustrate is that these processes now that I've described that take place during the workgroup meetings, this leads to collaboration outside the meetings that is improved. So I mean by the collaboration among the organization members. When they leave the workgroup meeting and they're on the hospital unit, for instance, and working, well, then their collaboration among the various different types of practitioners, for example, is improved. Their communication also improves. Interdepartmental understanding improves. So not just the, for example, practitioners who work together on on a ward may improve, but within departments that may improve because you may have people from a variety of different departments working with you on the study. Empowerment increases, acceptance of change increases. So I like to underscore that because, you know, OPR is all about trying to make some kind of a change, improve practices somehow. In any organization, we'll find resistance to change, especially if it's top-down. OPR is not top-down, right? It's everybody working together towards something and coming to compromises around what they should be changing and how. So the acceptance of the change then increases. And all of that then further leads to more sustainable changes, changes that will last over time. So people learn new skills, or they improve their existing skills. The care practices improve, which is typically one of the main expressed objective of a study to begin with. Job satisfaction increases. So you'll see that, you know, through all of these processes, well, people are collaborating better, they're communicating better, they're accepting change. Well, it follows then that job satisfaction increases. Coordination within the whole organization improves, and the readiness for change increases. So some of these outcomes here then in the end are beyond the people in the working group. Because of the way the project will be done, because of all of these processes that I've outlined, the people outside of the working group within the institution who are going to be affected by the work of the working group, by the changes that are being put into place, well, they find themselves being more ready, more accepting of the change as well. So that's the sum of what I wanted to go over, hoping that we would have then some time and some interest in discussing further about OPR.
Well, thank you for that, Paula. That was a really riveting presentation. I certainly learned a lot. So now the microphone is unmuted, and the floor is open for discussions and any questions. So if there's something that, you know, maybe you want to go into more detail on, Paula, that you think people might have questions on, we put this on the website. You're more than welcome to. If anybody else on here has anything else they would like to say, they can go ahead and do so. Oh, and I see myself on your screen.
Oh, I'm still sharing. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Oh my God, I don't see myself. No, it's okay. We're good now.
I don't want to name any names, but I do see that there's somebody on here called Jennifer. I don't know if Jennifer would like to make any comments.
Maybe we'll put your email too when we put the recording up on the website. I don't know if that helps. If people do have questions for listening, maybe if you don't mind, you know, in a couple of weeks' time, if you have, you know, random people messaging you to ask you.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, okay, so maybe we'll do that. Maybe I'll be sure to add that to the end of that. Well, thank you so much for that, Paula. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit and present this with us.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I like to get the word out about this type
Oh,
of
yeah,
work. So
definitely. I'm excited to have
more,
this on the website.
more people can do it. More people are. Because when I give presentations a lot, people always say, and the managers, I get this a lot from managers, they'll say, okay, great, I believe you. I believe you that it's important to work like, but how? And how do I get people to want to join and to stay engaged? This is always the question. So this is why we went forward with trying to operationalize what we found in the literature and prepare this practice guide. And it's the first version of the practice guide. I'm more than willing, and I hope that people will contact us and say, you know, I've tried to implement this, but recommendation, 1.4, it's not working for me. Please contact us with feedback so that we can continue to improve the practice guide and make it more and more useful and user-friendly.
And that helps you, too, to kind of see what you can improve upon. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Paula. Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.